Will here with another episode of the Customers Who Click podcast. Today I've got David Miltner joining me all the way from Berlin. David is the head of growth for the DACH region for Fiverr. For those who aren't aware, DACH is Germany, Austria and Switzerland. As a growth marketer, David works across the whole marketing funnel from acquisition to retention, finding optimal communication channels and timings and product improvements that really stimulate their core KPIs. David and I actually worked together for a couple of years at Europcar, now part of the Europcar Group. And I think it was clear early on to the both of us that we shared the same interest in taking a more holistic approach to growth. We were always discussing ways to improve the user experience, highlight the benefits of the service, and really analyze how and where we were getting valuable users from. So let's get David on to tell us a bit more about growth on Fiverr. Hi, David. Welcome to the podcast. If you could tell us a bit about yourself, what do you do at Fiverr? Why do you do what you do?
Hi, thanks for having me, Will. I'm David, the head of growth for the DACH market at Fiverr. What I'm doing is I'm taking care that our performance in terms of KPIs match our expectations or our plans by touching basically all the steps of the funnel from acquisition to retention and trying to, find the optimal communication channels, the right timings to stimulate our core KPIs.
Okay, so do you take quite a more of a holistic view of the whole customer journey and then work with the individual teams to make little tweaks?
Absolutely. So I think that's also a big difference between a traditional marketing manager and a growth manager, is that as a growth manager, you not only focus on, let's say, top of the funnel activities, but you also really have to dive in your product, optimize it for your audience, and also touch everything which is related to retention in order to increase lives of the users you acquire. So it is a very broad spectrum of tasks. Not only focusing on acquisition as, in my understanding, traditional marketing managers did so far.
I guess that kind of leads into, what does growth marketing mean to you? How do you envision it, I guess, in a bit more detail?
So basically, what is like a growth marketing is basically like marketing 2.0. Yeah, so it takes the traditional marketing model and adds different, let's say, layers of testing to it. So you want to really optimize the whole user experience from acquisition to the retention, and you do it very, very data driven. You do it throughout a lot of channels, and you do not stop where traditional marketing used to stop. So to create awareness, to get your message to your target audiences in order to acquire them, meaning that they download an app or they register with your product. But you take it a step further and also see that the whole experience with your product is optimized for your audiences. So you need to really dive into questions on how do I activate these users who downloaded my app or who registered with a product? How do I retain these guys in order to turn them into very loyal customers who come back and, of course, engage with your product, which is super important for your revenue. And finally, you want them to become ambassadors in the best case, so that these guys refer their friends and spread the word about your brand. So it's not only focusing on acquiring people through marketing campaigns, but also to have a more holistic view on how can I really make create an experience with my product, with my service, whatever it is, that people love and they love to use.
Yeah, so you'd say a growth marketer is someone who would have experience of the acquisition side to kind of know what's going on there, experience of the CRM and retention side to know how to, bring, the communications to bring people back, but also has that kind of product marketing experience as well to know how to, dig into the data and actually work with product teams to build a better product itself, which then kind of works harder for itself to actually grow the business and keep people engaged and retained with the business.
Absolutely. And what you just said is, I think, one of the most important things for a growth marketing guy is, data is so essential in order to make meaningful decisions. So you need to be data driven, meaning that you really want to measure all of your activities and have a tight look at them, dig deep this data to identify flaws or problems people might have with your product. This triggers another, let's say, a quality of a successful marketer is that you need to come up with very creative approaches and ideas on how to tackle those challenges if you identify them by looking at the data. You need to be very product focused, of course, in order to create the best user experience possible. This can only be done by testing, and iterating, of course. And I think it all comes really down to the signals you receive from a lot of data sources. And the magic is to read this data, come up with creative solutions to optimize a certain step in the funnel.
Yeah, definitely. So do you want to tell us a bit about how you approach growth at Fiverr? What does a standard day look like for you?
There is not a really standardized day, to be honest with you. Right now at Fiverr, we are focused on, or my job as a growth manager for the DACH region is, of course, to optimize and to spot potentials to, improve the user experience for my local audiences. This starts, as I said in the beginning, with acquisition. So there's not a one-size-fits-all communication, which is working throughout all geos out there. So you might have to adapt your global campaigns, which are mostly, tailored towards the biggest markets, of course, to resonate with your local audiences. And I think this requires a lot of, knowledge about culture, about how people behave with these products. Germans are not very well known for being very, very open and first movers when it comes down to digital solutions. So you have to create or communicate differently compared to other geos where people are very open and very love to experiment with new technologies or new solutions, digital solutions. This is one thing, and it translates also to the product itself. So meaning that you might have special requirements in certain geos, like local payment methods, for example. People are used to pay via a certain payment method, and if you do not offer it, people might be turned away because they're just used to be able to pay in their preferred maybe local currency or payment provider or stuff like this. And this is something we implemented very, very quickly and saw pretty good signals in doing that. And it also stuff like, offering multi-language support, which is a huge project, huge challenge. It's not enough to just translate the homepage or your e-commerce store, but or your Facebook ads or your AdWords, but you want also people to don't have a broken experience, so you need to also touch, which is everything CRM related, for example, all your email communication, all your post registration communication, so to say, and if you want to offer maybe customer care in a local language, this all is very, very challenging tasks, and not something you could just do overnight. So you need to have a straight plan on how to execute it, and this is something I'm focused right now, is really to optimize the whole user experience to our local audiences in order to to see growth, organic growth, especially for the business in our specific geo.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting about the localization stuff. I think we see similar problems when people talk about personalization. A lot of businesses tend to run with, we'll put the first name in an email. We might mention like a couple of the products they've bought previously or something like that. But you actually, to really personalize the experience, you have to go so much deeper. And localization is a similar thing. I think the approach, well, I think you and I saw it. So David and I actually worked together a couple of years ago. And I think one of the problems we saw was that the approach to localization was initially, we just need to translate this into each language. But actually the rest of the product pretty much stayed the same. And then when you and I were talking with the other marketing managers around Europe, we were discovering that things like the postcode in the UK works differently to pretty much the rest of the world. You've got different payment methods that people prefer in different countries. I think you Germans are not very keen on credit cards, are you?
No, absolutely.
And I think that was the main method we took payment. You got like verification tools and things. There's and different regulations and things. When you, especially if you're in a regulated or more regulated market, there are very different things you have to take to bear in mind for a particular region.
Absolutely, and you only have limited resources, of course, so you really need to, and you have such a lot of normally a lot of ideas, and you have a lot of things you spot where you might be able to optimize stuff. And now given your the resources you have, you need to prioritize them as well, and you have to come up with a hypothesis to test, and this is again a test and learn and iteration phase where you have to just see how do I allocate certain resources to the most urgent problems, and you also want to get let's say, you need to have a very relevant number of data which to base your decisions on, right? So let's stick with our previous conversation we had. For example, in the UK. You had the DVLA test, which we didn't have in Germany. We had certain, GDPR requirements, which you didn't have in the UK. And now, as an organization, you have all these different requirements, and of course, you need to prioritize them accordingly, and see, what you think makes the most impact, and you basically go for the low-hanging fruit first, and then wrap your mind around the more, around other topics, which might also bind a lot of resources and might not, have the same impact So basically, to spot, you need to spot the biggest blockers, allocate the resources accordingly, and especially if you're operating in different geos, it's always a fight to see, what makes most sense at a certain time, which problem or which challenge creates the most value if you solve it. And that's mostly a very, very intense, let's say, point. You need to be clear.
So speaking of prioritization, do you have any particular methodologies or processes for, if you've got a bunch of experiment ideas or feature changes that you want to make, how do you go about deciding which ones should be done first or at all?
I mean, there's a very simple answer to that. I mean, you prioritize according to the resources you have available for a certain task, and you go for an optimization or for a change which perhaps brings the most, or you consider that it brings the biggest impact on your business, on your core KPIs, which you try to stimulate. Yeah. So it's always a question of what kind of resources do I have available, how fast can I tackle it, and what kind of impact does it do on my KPIs, on the goals I want to have. So it's basically
so kind of like effort versus impact, or effort and impact. See how much resource and how much time something's going to take, and how much impact to your kind of your most important KPIs it's going to have. Absolutely,
that's exactly what it is.
So at Fiverr, what sort of KPIs do you look at? What's when you're thinking about growth, do you have any specific? Well, yeah, you must have specific KPIs. What sort of things do you really focus on at Fiverr?
I mean, I think we are. I mean, what is super critical for us is, of course, that we activate people very, very quickly. First-time buyers is one core KPI, which we try to increase and stimulate, of course, and then it's lifetime value of a buyer. So we of course want to acquire people who are not only signing up, making a one-time purchase and then disappear, but we want them to come back and of course engage with our product and build their businesses with Fiverr, and of course also spend some money on Fiverr. That are two core KPIs which I can mention, which we've taken a close look at it. Of course, we have over 300 categories on the platform, so we have dedicated teams, looking for each vertical on the platform, and we constantly try to, optimize the experience in a way that people are able to, or that we empower them to, to use Fiverr very, very quickly, very, very flawlessly, and that they really have a good experience. So they come back and they, that we acquire audiences with a good lifetime value. That's true. Like that's critical. Of course, we want to minimize churn. You always that's normal. Every business has a certain churn rate, and you really need to dive into also these cohorts and see when and where people get lost, and then come up with creative ideas on how to either reactivate them to come back and engage with your product.
I think you said a big thing was speed and ease of use. So it's kind of all about when someone lands on the site for the first time, do you see a big impact kind of on lifetime value and value of the users if they are able to complete a job very quickly? So if someone comes to the site looking to buy something, if they can do that like in their first experience of their website, that has a big impact on their value.
I'm so sure, and this is not solely related to Fiverr. This is, I think, for all the businesses out there. If you're having a great first-time experience, and I remember that we took great emphasis and focus on at our when we were working together to make people. To engage people super fast because we see like once they have a very good first-time experience, of course they reconsider you as a very, very handy and useful solution. It's more probable. The probability is much higher that these guys, come back to you once you have a good. I mean, it's the same thing with a restaurant. Yeah, if I go to a restaurant and I get a crappy meal, I might never come back. Yeah. But if I, come to a restaurant and the service is amazing and the food is mind blowing, of course I'm coming back and have another dinner.
Do you think there are any common myths about growth marketing? I think we went through a patch over the last few years, maybe, where kind of growth hacking in particular became a big thing. But a lot of, at least what I saw, was the majority of people out there weren't growth marketers as you've described them earlier.
I mean, in my opinion, there is like the big difference between a growth hacker and a growth marketer is that a growth hacker is a guy who is very, very also very data driven, and he's very good at spotting potentials or flaws in the product or in the user journey or on the acquisition side and the retention side, and tries to tackle this problem within a very, very limited time. All the actions are focused on very short-term providing very short-term solutions, which make an impact. While a growth marketer looks more towards a mid and long-term strategic approach to increase and stimulate the main KPIs for an organization. I think growth hacking is also more an attitude than a profession, because a growth hacker needs to tap into almost every, or must be able to tap into every step in the funnel and also disrupt this. And this can cause a lot of friction within an organization because it might disrupt ways of working which an organization was used to, or it might interfere with other priorities from other teams. So like a growth hacker is more or less a guy who really has to have also from an organizational point of view or must have the ability to tap into certain topics where also where he tries to, through experimentation, and you never know if something works or not. So the probability of failure is also pretty high. At least you have a learning, but you need to have an organization with the same mindset as well to support you as a growth hacker, or as a to be able to do these stunts, to try and test new things, maybe approaches which are out of the box, which seem to be very insane at a certain time of for a lot of people, and it's also like I think a growth hacker needs to have the ability to also convince a lot of people in-house or in the organization to support these types of activities, which might stimulate the business extremely on the one hand, but on the other hand, you also might break stuff, which is very unpleasant for a lot of other or colleagues, because then you have extra work to do.
Yeah. So if you were, let's say, advising a startup or working at a new startup, and you were building out the growth kind of element of their team, how would you go about it? What recommendations would you make to a company when they're looking at creating a growth team? And what do you think there's some common problems that companies face, and when they look into this?
It's a very complex question. Again, I think there is not a blueprint of how to grow your startup from zero to hero. If there was a formula like this, it's the marketing world would be much easier. So it all depends it depends on the goals you have, and you need to have and this is my 5 cents. In the beginning, I think you need to focus on people who come with the right mindset. You want to have very enthusiastic people who are really feeling ownership for the mission of the company, and you want to have more generalistic talent rather than specialist talent when it comes down to growth guys or marketing guys, because especially as a startup, you have very limited resources in-house, and you need to be able to tackle a lot of different things and execute it as well. Otherwise, you can have the most amazing ideas if you don't have the talent, or if you don't have the manpower to really execute this stuff. It won't bring you anywhere. So in my opinion is that you need a guy who is very enthusiastic, very versatile on a lot of different topics. You need to have a problem solver, basically, because problems always pop up, and you need to be able to adapt to these problems and come up with good solutions in a very, very limited time with very limited resources, and still make it happen. So my advice is really take 5 minutes longer in terms of recruiting people to get the right talent on board. And you also need people who are willing to collaborate between a lot of different teams. You need people who can tap into acquisition, who also have a very good understanding of product. So they need to talk to a lot of touch points with a lot of different teams or people in your organization, which you might rely on all the time.
A tough role to fill, really. You need someone who's got a broad range of marketing experience. They're someone who can comfortably communicate with different departments in the company. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said problem solvers. I think problem solvers are definitely, for me, one of the most important parts of a growth function within a business.
And this is exactly the mindset you need to have. So, I mean, when we were, I had my experiences with very corporate organizations in the past, and you always run to departments or people with the mindset of, hey, we never did this, we don't have to start it now. It always worked the way we did it, and this is exactly what you will never hear from a growth or from a growth marketer, or even from a growth hacker. This is something you will never hear, because if you never tried something out, you don't know the potential, and you cannot assess the potential of a certain action, of a certain change. Might it be an acquisition in the product or in your retention? And you need to have the freedom to experiment and to conduct these experiments, to get the signals, to get data, and to learn. And even if you fail, it's a good learning, and what to avoid in your next steps. So you need to have a problem, and you know how it is. I mean, problems are mostly very complex, and there's not like this one single screw you need to touch and then the whole machine works again. But there are several screws you need to tighten, or there are several optimizations which you need to do in order to get the desired outcome or signals. So yeah, and the fewer resources you have, the more creative you must become to overcome these hurdles or challenges. And again, maybe this is another thing. I mean, Fiverr is a wonderful platform where you can get all the expertise, all the experts for these very critical problems. And I wish, I mean, when we were working together, Will, we were having a lot of discussions about limited resources, and we wish that we had talent who are able to tackle a certain problem, and we weren't able at that time to, or we didn't know, or we didn't consider other or freelance talent to bring on board to get things done very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. It's a nice little plug for Fiverr there. It's something you kind of have to have considered before. I think a lot of people, if they've never worked with freelancers, the idea just doesn't even come to them. Whereas once you have worked with a few, you're much more likely to bring that into a business with you and say, well, I know we can get external designers or copywriters or whatever who can fill a gap in our resources really like cheaply. Just get like a little project done for us and allow us to actually run this experiment or make this change to our website. So I think, I wonder if a lot of people don't quite realize the value there because they've just never really looked into it, never considered it.
I totally agree. And it's a pity, because I mean, so many, there's so many nice and interesting businesses out there, and most of them they have the very similar problems, and there's so much talent out there, so much experts which you can really onboard on a certain problem and get their insights and their knowledge to tackle your problem and just push and bring your business forward. Yeah. And frankly, I mean, nobody's perfect and nobody knows all the steps and all the tools and, is an expert in all the, nitty gritty stuff of certain tasks. And this was also a very valuable learning for me, is to really bring people in who are absolutely experts in a certain field, trust them, and I personally had only amazing experiences by doing that.
Yeah, I think personally I've had some better experiences with freelancers than I have with various agencies or kind of software platforms that have tried to replicate the idea. So moving on a little bit, do you have any pet peeves when it comes to marketing, maybe particularly involved in growth?
What I don't like, and this might be a very cultural thing or a personal thing, is if I have the feeling that I get pushed, and people over advertise or over promise stuff, and then when you engage with the product, you have this this feeling of, oh my God, I just got scammed. Yeah, this is a waste of time, and this is something what everybody experienced. I think more than once.
So kind of the over-promise, under-deliver.
Yes, over-promise, under-deliver is I think one of the biggest.
Yeah, so you can have an awesome advertisement, get people really hyped up. They arrive on the website, they buy the products, and then they're kind of like, that was a bit of a waste.
Yeah, I mean, and these are guys you will never see again. So this type of communication is will not contribute to very valuable users. I think as a business, you need to be very transparent, and it's not a problem also to say, hey, I don't have the solution for each and every problem you're facing. So to really highlight what you can do and what you can't do, to manage expectations before people really engage or engage with your product or with your brand, and then finally get to the point where they have the feeling that this is not what was expected. So sticking with the restaurant example, I mean, if I come to a fancy restaurant and there is a lot of shishi going on in the and they are trying to behave as a 5-star restaurant, and then I get a fatty piece of meat with a tasteless sauce and some overcooked spaghettis. I'm much more disappointed than if it was a little shady shack where I already can anticipate before I set a foot in that I might not get a gourmet meal.
Yeah, so kind of set expectations low. And then
yeah, it's always better to over-deliver or to just communicate very transparently and very honestly what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, I think a lot of mobile games fall into this category. You get a lot of mobile games that probably spend a lot of money on advertising and producing video advertisements for their games, but it just doesn't match up to the actual game experience. And I think sometimes they give a very, very different vision of what the game is. Then you download the game, you start playing, and you're like, well, this isn't the game I thought it was. You delete it, you're done. And I think in the app space, it's a very, very wasteful and dangerous tactic to go with. Obviously, if you've got a great game, it works. But yeah, for me, that's an area where there's a lot of over-promising, under-delivering, where I guess the actual message is is quite far off the mark.
I totally agree with you. I mean, again, what you want to have is loyal users, people who love your product, people which, where your product really either offers a solution to a certain problem, and then people, engage with it, and they love it, and they use it. And if you build products or communications which do not match the value, or which don't match, the things which you promised, then people will just bounce, and you have a shitload of acquisition costs. While at some stage, you have to realize, oh my God, this is an unsustainable business, and that's it, and you run into serious existential problems.
Yeah, I think actually another area that probably affects quite a lot is things that you book in advance. In particular, things like flights and hotels, where you'll get advertised, flights from this location to that location from this price, and it'll be the super low price. But actually, that price is available on one flight on one particular day, one class, and it doesn't work for you. And then the flights you actually want are 5 times the price. That's definitely one that annoys me a bit. I get really excited when I see cheap flights to Brazil and places, and then actually the only ones that are worth booking are quite a bit more expensive.
Totally.
So just finally, you've got your one particular marketing channel or tactic that you're not really a fan of, and you would be happy to kill off. What would it be?
Marketing channel, this would be definitely a marketing channel which just doesn't bring people who are engaging with your product.
I mean specifically, like, is there a particular tactic that you see used that you think, let's just can people please stop doing that?
I mean, of course, as you sticking with your previous example of flight booking, using fear as a motivation to upsell or cross-sell certain products. So, for example, if you are booking a flight, then they want to upsell you in insurance, and an some extras, which are not really essential to the core product you want to purchase. And the flow, and I think this is something where the flow is very important. So of course I don't want to do 20 extra clicks in order to complete a checkout, and this is something which might work for certain businesses, and they might do a lot of money with it. But from a user perspective, personally, and this is my very, very humble personal opinion, is this something I just don't like experiencing.
So being forced to jump through like extra hoops and go through extra steps, even when you kind of like exactly what you want to pay for, but you're still forced to go through everything.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fair enough, that they offer these extra, that a company or a product offers certain extras. But if you have to go through it in your normal booking process or something like this, this is something which I personally don't really like, and I think a lot of people don't like it. It's the same like on booking.com or on other hotel platforms. It's by having pop-ins saying, hey, this offer is viewed by 20 other people, or which creates, the urgency to do the click. Dynamic pricing is also sometimes very disappointing. I just recently was on vacation, and I experienced that with one, hotel booking provider. The app showed like 70% difference in pricing compared to the web experience. And this is, of course, where I, as a user, feel a bit, betrayed, and feel that these guys, they're playing games with me. And it's not about, a couple of cents, but it's money. So the dynamic pricing is also something which I think is, it definitely works business-wise, but in terms of, trust building, or in terms of a good user experience, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I guess it's almost where one company is almost being a bit too smart, and because the other companies aren't, when you go to compare the prices, one company's got maybe like a fixed price that they just leave on there forever, and the other one's going, well, because we've got more demand, we'll put the price up and stuff. And so because it's so easy to compare, you see one that's priced much, much higher, and you go, well, no, I'm not going to buy that, am I? And then it probably happens again and again. Maybe the third time you go, well, what's the point in having this app if they're just always priced higher?
Absolutely. I mean, this is like, after me experience it the first time, and it was, I think, $70 difference for a night of, staying at the same hotel, same room. So $70 more on the app compared to the website. Just because, they analyzed my previous booking behaviors, and they saw, maybe I'm willing to spend a little more than maybe an average, customer in this time or in this geo or whatever. That I have the feeling to get ripped off just because of my previous behavior in the app, and this is something which turns me away from the product as a whole. So I would not come back and give it another try, but go to a different provider where I don't have this experience, and people are comparing, and people are it's like digitalization adds a lot of transparency out there, and people are aware of such tactics. And I think if you don't do it like super clever, you might even hurt your business by doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely agree. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Really, really interesting stuff about growth and Fiverr.
Thanks, Will.
So it's clear to me that a growth marketing attitude is key to a business success. While you don't have to have a growth team or a head of growth, you do need people who can take a more holistic view, especially further down the funnel, to really understand what's working and what's really driving growth for your business. By taking a view on all the marketing channels of a business, along with product engagement, retention, customer service, you'll better understand where the gaps are, not just in your marketing, but in the business as a whole. Acquisition teams have their metrics to work towards, retention teams have their metrics to work towards, and the focus kind of is almost exclusively on using their channel to meet that metric. So PPC campaigns will always be optimized better. Email and marketing automation will be optimized. But actually, there's probably work to do in the middle on the product itself, and making the product work harder to actually convert, activate, and retain those customers. Being a growth marketer is about being very data-driven and product-driven, and coming up with creative user experience solutions and finding those growth levers within the product itself. You can have the best idea for a product and some great marketing behind it, but if people can't really work out how to use the site or the app, you're just causing yourself a problem. you're negatively impacting your conversion rates, your activation rates, your retention rates, and therefore your revenue. That's all from me. Make sure you subscribe at customerswhoclick.com for future episodes. We've got some great guests lined up to talk about affiliates, SEO, referral schemes, and much more. As usual, if you've got any questions about growth marketing, send them over to will@customerswhoclick.com and I'll get back to you myself. In the next episode of Customers Who Click, I'll be speaking with Adam Kitchen from Magnet Monster. We'll be discussing the use of behavioral email, segmentation, and some key areas that a business should focus on in this space. But until then, keep those customers clicking.